Oi oi, it's your boy Slacky J, coming at you with the Fights Gone By podcast episode 154. Is this 154 or 153? We skipped Friday, because my recording gear did a big old shit on itself. But we had some fights this weekend, we had some fun finishes, we had some absolute slogs, and we had a good technical scrap between Leon Edwards and Rafael dos Anjos, which immediately was met with hatred online, because we don't like good technical scraps, especially when one man is part of a meme. But anyway, we'll do the news first, obviously, and then we'll get into the fights. So the big news this week, before we even get into it, John Jones may or may not have choked a waitress. There may or may not be a warrant out for his arrest. I don't know, because I don't trust the site that's reporting it, and as of now, no other sites have picked up on it. So be aware that I'm aware, but I'm also not going to get myself sued by saying that happened. It would be, I don't know, violent crime, not really in his wheelhouse, more recklessness than anything else, but again, we'll see. And then the other big piece of news this week, of course, is that Sijara Eubanks and Betch Correia are going head-to-head in Mexico City, September 21st, Fight of the Year, certainly Women's Fight of the Year, presumably to decide who gets first title shot, and then the loser gets a slightly later one. Other weird matchups we've got going on. Sadawad versus Goichi Yamauchi in Bellator 229. Yamauchi can be quite fun, good fun ground player, did a beautiful Kimura trap back take in his last fight, I think that was. Sadly couldn't get anything going on the ground against Michael Chandler, who just held him against the fence, because when Michael Chandler wants to fight boring, he will fight boring. And Sadawad has some good knockouts. What else we got? In terms of Bellator news, Miles Jury's heading over to Bellator. Now that's an interesting development, because, well, I suppose it's just sort of like how his career path's gone, because for a while he was looking like the new hotness. He had he came off the Ultimate Fighter, he had a good little run. They put him in with Donald Cerrone, and it was like, oh, cusp of the next big thing. Got his ass kicked literally by Donald Cerrone, and then he's just sort of been hot and cold since then. I think was his last one the loss to Feely? I can't remember, but Bellator seems like a good place for him. They've got a decent lightweight division, featherweight division, whatever he's fighting in, and I'm sure he can make a mark there. Other matchup news, Melvin Gillard and Isaac Valley Flag are going to have a bare-knuckle fight at BKFC. Good. And Todd Duffy is fighting Jeff Hughes at UFC Vancouver. That doesn't sound like the kind of name that you'd expect the Duff man to get back in with, but remember how bad his decline was, and then how long it has been since he fought. And didn't he have some terrible illness or injury that almost, killed him? I can't recall the details, but and then the really big news, of course, is that Justin Gaethje and Donald Cerrone have been booked for September, and that's the UFC Vancouver card. Who else is on? Oh, the Duffy Hughes fight is on there. But I've been saying time and time again that Vancouver card's looking good. We'll have a look at it nearer the time, I imagine, but there's a good few names going on that. Gaethje versus Cerrone, or as I like to call it, how will Donald Cerrone do against a pressure fighter this time? That is a hard matchup for Cerrone, but then Gaethje is the constant forward pressure, often not entirely controlled. I could see him eating the knees, getting tired out, maybe taken down once he's tired, because that's how Poirier and Eddie Alvarez had success. When they felt like they could just hit a takedown, he'd explode back up off the floor and then tire himself out. And a little bit of light-hearted news, Amadovsky failed a USADA test for marijuana, taken on 420. My reaction to that was just king. What a king. So let's talk about them fights. I'm going to be honest, I skipped several of these because if you watched the prelims, it was rough. Not a single finish until the main card, which does not necessarily say bad prelims. There are plenty of quality decision fights, and I don't want to say that I'm one of those people who hates a decision, but the state of some of these decisions were just, incredibly tedious. The Ray Borg one, Ray Borg just laid on a dude along the fence in the old laying it out position. And everyone wants Ray Borg to do well because he's had such a horrible recent life with the health problems with his child. But he's just, And I was watching this going, do you remember that beating him and Wilson Hayes was enough for Fighter of the Year? That was an absolute joke. There was never a point when they were both killers. It was just a desperation to put a prize on Demetrius Johnson, because we were all in that phase where we were like, you got to appreciate Demetrius Johnson, and if you don't, you're not cool. Skip the Roxanne Modafferi match. She lost, but she'll always be my girl for beating Valentina Shevchenko's sister when everyone was like, she's gonna get murdered. So then we get into Klidson Abreu versus Sam Alvey. This was a typical Sam Alvey fight. There was some swinging, but not in a productive way, and he did a lot of, I'll do my Dom Cruise here, staring in the mirror. Jesus, was that annoying, him just saying that over and over again. I did appreciate that they were bringing Trevor Whitman in more now, not just at the end of the rounds to talk about what the corners were saying. And they might have just been experimenting with that because it was such a slow night of prelims, but I thought that was really fun getting Trevor Whitman in for his opinion. And, what he was saying about Alexander Hernandez later was just bang on the money. He was saying, I can see why Trevor Whitman is one of the best coaches in the world. But this Sam Alvey fight, I was so bored that I had time to recall and then look up my favourite Sam Alvey story of all time. On Flow Grappling, Sam Alvey strongly against formation of a fighters' union. Here's the quotes. "I'm strongly against unions," Alvey said. "I've said that before. The unions want to pay everybody the same amount, and I don't support that. Conor McGregor earned his multi-millions by the way he runs his mouth and the way he wins. With a union, he wouldn't be worth that. He wouldn't be worth half of what he's asking. Now, for some guys who don't stand out like him, I think a union could do well, but I think that they are taking something from someone that has earned it. Myself, I don't want it, because I think I'm going to be worth every penny of what Conor McGregor is. I just need to get that win streak going and run my mouth a bit. With a union like that, I just don't like it. I'm worth more than some of the other fighters. As bad as that sounds, I am. I work harder. I say yes to every podcast. Heck, I say yes to everything. I go out of my way to do appearances. I think that most fighters won't. And I think it shows the way I tweet and the way I interact with people." So a pretty dumb quote there from Sam Alvey. Let's take that apart. Now, the reason this is interesting is because obviously he's not Conor McGregor. He doesn't fight like Conor McGregor. He's not doing the interesting things that earned Conor McGregor his multi-millions. But at the heart of that, there's the basic misunderstanding of what a players' association, and the choice to call it a union is probably not helping, because everyone goes, oh, well, we're turning into communist Russia. But a players' association, the point is not to get everyone paid equally. And he said that unironically. He believes that. There are lots of fighters who believe that a union wants everyone paid equally. That is not true at all. If you look at the actual players' associations, which you almost never hear anything about, because now that they're established, they're just a part of the sport in their sport, and the managers have to deal with them, and that's that. So like the NBA Players Association or the Major League Baseball Players Association. Now, if you thought that, say, obviously LeBron James is not paid the same as everyone else, and LeBron James isn't just making that up in merchandising, he is genuinely paid a lot of money. What the Players Association does is looks at the revenue split, works out the minimum, and that's why an NBA player starting this year, an NBA player coming in as a rookie this year, so 0 years of experience, gets $898,000 for the year. Which sounds, that to me, that sounds like a lot of money. But for someone who's worked their whole life to get to that position, that sounds like a fair amount of money. That doesn't stop LeBron or Kobe when he was playing making almost billions. That's just the minimum. And that is what a Players Association will do for the UFC. So while it's fun to laugh at Alvey because of that, he has been lied to. That's why he believes what he believes. And that is what people do about unions. There was an amazing poster that Delta put up because they didn't want their staff unionizing. They put up a poster saying union fees could cost you as much as $700 a year. Why not buy a new games console? And you're like, well, maybe being in the union would earn me more money than I'm earning now. It's not in their interest to tell you what's in your best interest. And the even more ironic part, of course, is that Sam Alvey got in trouble for spray tanning a sponsor on himself. Why can they not choose their own sponsors and use their own sponsors? Because the UFC put in the Reebok deal without consultation of the athletes. Do you think they'd have been able to pull that off if there was a players' union or a players' association who were like, no, don't do that, or we'll walk? So Sam Alvey, bit of a dummy, and then acts really surprised when he loses these close decisions. And now he's on a 3-fight losing streak, so he's probably going to get cut, which is another thing that could be addressed by a players' union. You could make it so that you don't just have to lose one to get cut, but if you keep winning, you have to stay on your contract. But enough about that, because I didn't really want to talk about the Sam Alvey fight anyway. It was shit. But that sort of breaks up the bad fights. Raquel Pennington beat Irene Aldana. Alex Caceres won a decision over Steven Peterson. He's now 10-10 in the UFC. But he's still there because, he has some fun performances sometimes. And then we're getting into the main card, and the main card was actually alright. Started with Andrei Arlovski versus Ben Rothwell, and Andrei Arlovski apparently has a new boxing coach, but what I really liked about him, there's been several phases of Arlovski. When he was with Freddie Roach, he was boxing better, but wasn't really throwing his right hand. Then he had that, career resurgence where he just threw his right hand like a nutter, and now he's back in this phase where he's been knocked out a few times, and he was just sort of leaning on dudes. But this new boxing coach seems to have got him working. He landed so many left hands in this fight. I was really quite surprised. He was going jab, right hand, jab, jab, or jab, right hand, hook. And he was catching Rothwell repeatedly because not only was he throwing with good volume, which you don't see at heavyweight, but also Rothwell probably is going and expecting, certainly last time, just like waiting on the right hand. And the left hand was doing a lot of the work. There was still some retarded stuff in there. He backed Rothwell onto the fence and then ran to do a jumping vertical hammer fist. Fucking why? But yeah, not a bad fight. And Rothwell, obviously, one of the great underrated chins in MMA. He has one of the best chins I've ever seen. It was Nelson got all the attention for it, but Rothwell has been in with some absolute monsters. If you saw Cain Velasquez just snapping his head back with like a dozen uppercuts to the face along the fence, and Rothwell is just moving forward completely unfazed through it. I mean, he took the best blows from Mark Hunt, people like that. Monster chin. So well done to him for standing up to that rather. Very weird striking style, always has, but I thought he looked a bit out of sorts compared to his usual style. He was doing this sort of like jabby thing, but then he'd bring his elbow back high, like he was trying to do a shoulder roll, but really he was just sort of like opening up his entire right side. And Andrei Arlovski did dig some body shots eventually to that side. Rothwell did land a nice little flurry and stun Arlovski. I think that was towards the end of the second or the third, but he stunned him and hit him with an uppercut and then tried to snap him down into that go-go choke. Which, first man to submit Josh Barnett, so he super legit, and he caught Matt Mitrione with it too. I think Ben's problem is inactivity. Like part of that was that suspension for drugs, but I felt like that little run of Mitrione and Barnett. Actually, now I'm looking at it, he fights like every 6 months and has for quite a while. That Brandon Vera fight was back in 2013. Fucking hell. It just weird. I mean, the Blagoy-Ivanov one, I thought he probably should have won. Would have been interesting if we got that Verdum one that was scheduled twice, but. Yeah, he's in a weird spot. They probably won't get rid of him because he's good enough that he could go and be Bellator heavyweight champion. Good on Arlovski. I mean, I want Arlovski to retire. I think he's taken way too much punishment in his career. He's like the most knocked out fighter in the UFC with Alistair Overeem. But I really like what he did this fight. Just put up the volume, fight a bit scrappier, wasn't very pretty. It wasn't like when he was working with Freddie Roach and he was using the jab and the inside low kick to set everything up beautifully and throwing the right uppercut into the right straight or the right straight into the right uppercut. Like the first time he knocked out Rothwell, he was very slick in that fight. But this one, he just came out and threw, which was good. Then he had Alexander Hernandez versus Francisco Trinaldo. And I'm glad I wasn't able to do the preview on Friday, because I would have said that this is my pick for Sleeper Fight of the Night, and it's going to be great, and you should be really excited. Because I was excited going into this fight, and then it was shit. Francisco Trinaldo, always sort of like a slower paced guy, a big counter fighter. It has a couple of tricks. I mean, when he speared Evan Dunham's liver with his knee, that was kind of a new trick we hadn't seen much before. But mainly his thing is like timing good left hands, being a bit awkward, strong in the clinch, things like that. Hernandez came out and just, as Trevor Whitman said, just fought from 2 or 3 inches too far out on everything. His problem against Cerrone was that he didn't actually hide his entries at all. He just kept going straight in and getting hit with knees. So rather than feint from the edge of range, get the opponent moving, and then move in as they're relaxing from their reaction, he was feinting and then not really doing anything, and then running in from range and not quite coming close enough and running out again. It was a dire fight in that respect. There were some good punches by Trinaldo. I mean, if you looked at, I don't want to be like the look at his face guy, but Hernandez had clearly been hit in the face quite a bit, and Trinaldo was like unmarked by the end of it. So Hernandez wins the decision. He's getting on my tits, I'll be honest, because he came in, starched Beneil Dariush in a very interesting performance. He had the stance switchy stuff, shocked Beneil Dariush, who was a number 10, who's a top 10 lightweight in the world at the time. But that's just being a lightweight. If you come in and nobody knows who you are and you're a decent lightweight, you could be one of the best fighters in the world and no one would know, because that's the depth of the lightweight division. But after that, he just had that snoozer against Olivier. Oh, it wasn't really a snoozer. It was just like a grind against Olivier Aubin-Mercier, where he was just trying to hold him against the fence the entire time. And then he fought Don Cerrone and just did bizarre running flurries and getting kneed constantly. And then this fight, he just came out and point fought and didn't really even score any points, except on the judges' scorecards. Bad fight. Dan Hooker versus James Vick. Now, on Friday, when I wanted to record a podcast and preview it, I was going to say this is my pick for weirdest fight of the night, because both of them are very tall dudes. I thought, how are they going to match up? Because also James Vick and Daniel Hooker fight long, quite well, but Dan Hooker, we saw against Edson Barbosa, he doesn't have that other fighting style of going forward very well. because he tried to fight his usual fight against Edson Barboza. When Edson Barboza, everyone knows, you just got to go at him. And Dan Hooker's trying to stand out at range and throw long low kicks and counter him and stuff. And then, when he got hurt and moved in, he actually was able to fluster Edson and stop him from landing good blows for a bit. But, by then it was too late. He'd been battered. And then Vic, of course, another long guy with a jab and an uppercut and then a good intercepting knee, but also leaving his head up on a platter the entire time. So it was weird watching these guys both try and fight not tall, because neither of them was like the tall guy. Well, I mean, one of them was slightly taller, but neither of them was the tall guy in the cage. So what you saw was both of them actually got caught going backwards by long straight right hands, because against anyone else it would have just fallen short. You've got that height, they're punching up, which reduces your reach to begin with. But just both of them were going straight back, got hit with these right hands and looked like, I normally get away with that. But Hooker he actually did stay aggressive in this one in a very Dan Hookery sort of way. And then he established a jab, threw some good right hands, and then he came, I think it was jab, feinted with his right shoulder, and then came up with the left hook. So hooking off the jab, Dan Hooker, already a boy, double boy for this, and put Vic down and finished him with ground and pound. Hooking off the jab, everyone, do it. Vic in a weird spot, obviously, he lost to Justin Gaethje, got smoked in that fight, and then he lost to Paul Felder in a fight that was awkward, is how I describe it, because Paul Felder didn't really do the things that had been proven to work against Vic. He just sort of like gutsied his way through it. And then this one is obviously a devastating loss for Vic. He barely got going in this one. So, rough place to be, but it's the lightweight division and you've just fought like 3 top 15 guys in a row. So, it'd be very silly to cut him at this point. Greg Hardy versus Juan Adams. I think what was the one we were talking about? Juan Adams versus Bulla, whatever his name was, the Indian guy who was described as a Kushti wrestler. And I was like, the first 30 seconds of this was great, and then it got back to being a heavyweight contest. But yeah, this guy, D1 wrestler, comes out, shoots, gets sprawled on, gets down on a hip, can't come up to his knees, just stays there getting punched in the side of the head. Very short punches, not really, gonna kill you. But Greg Hardy obviously hits hard and was just going rah, rah, rah every time he punched. So finally the referee just had to stop it. And Juan Adams afterwards was like, I wish Mario was reffing or something like that. But not a great performance for Juan Adams as he was hunting for this fight. Greg Hardy, I mean, obviously, if you can sprawl on a D1 wrestler like that, you've got some athletic ability and you've learned a bit. I'm not going to say that Greg Hardy is a crap heavyweight, because all heavyweights are fairly crap, and he's one of the better ones at the moment. So who do they give him going forward? Obviously, we all want the Derek Lewis fight. I think that's going to be the payoff to this whole thing, because obviously the point of having an absolutely loathed individual on your... Obviously, he's an exciting athlete, but the point is to create, firstly, arguments on the internet, but secondly, just draw eyes to the product. And also, when he loses, people are going to go mental for it. The GIF's going to make the front page of Reddit. That's the payoff on this whole thing. When he gets knocked out, everyone's going to love it. So I think they'll probably, keep kicking the can down the line a little bit, but not too far. I don't know. Juan Adams was ranked at number 48 on Tapology, which is just above Alexander Emelianenko, and a little way below the, I believe, retired Stefan Struve. So yeah, heavyweight rankings, a mess. Oh my god, Jared Rochelt's still around. I don't know, put him in with Sergei Spatsnikov or whatever his name was, the guy who Walt Harris just starched in his previous performance. Because he looked like he'd been a bully his entire career and then finally met a decent heavyweight, and just as soon as they started punching him, he shelled up and got murdered. So I think that's the best way you could feed Greg Hardy a knockout over a decently ranked opponent. Alternatively, put him in with Junior Albini, but then he might get ground out and laid on or something. Then your co-main event was Walt Harris versus Alexi Oil. Comes out, hits him a couple of times, throws a flying knee, clips him with a jab coming down off the flying knee and knocks him spark out. Yeah, whatever. I mean, it says flying knee and left cross here, but the left cross was not much of a left cross. It was definitely just like a paw, but he's big enough and powerful enough that he can just starch people like that. I mean, Harris is on, the last 2, he just smoked him in seconds. The previous one to this was Sergey, whatever his name was. Sergey Spivak, sorry. Before they had the fight with Arlovsky, which I can barely remember. But, previous to this, I only really remembered him for beating up Cyril Asker, and then... Oh, no, and Chase Sherman, I remember that one. But also just for getting armbarred in seconds by Verdum, when Verdum was like, I'll try my grappling again. And then got Godbeer, the one where he kicked him and just flicked his ear. But now he's on a 2-fight winning streak. Arlovski's, back in the picture, so fair enough. That's, move him into title contention. Why not? It's so bad, this division. Just so bad. And then in your main event, you had Leon Edwards versus Rafael dos Anjos. Now we're going to get technical. I'm sorry, you're going to have to tolerate it, but we're going to geek out on this one. I didn't get a chance to do a preview piece on this, and I thought, fuck, because then people take the Filthy Casuals Guide as like a prediction or something, and it never is. It's just like, what is interesting that someone this weekend does, and that will interest other people? That's how I decide how those get made, and what they focus on. But, Leon Edwards, his last two prior to this, he just dominated with the head post, basically. He was sharpshooting out of range. When the opponent closed in, he'd get his head in front of theirs, clamp down on the whizzer, knee him in the gut. If you haven't seen the Filthy Casuals Guide, go watch that. But I was quite interested in this one because Rafael dos Anjos, if you saw his level changes against Kevin Lee, they were just perfect. He's not Donald Cerrone or Gunnar Nelson. He's not coming in over long distance. He's really he'll get you boxing and then he'll just duck in on your hips, perfect, be in on them already, not like shooting knee to the floor, just like quick duck in, take you over as, in basically a boxing exchange more than a wrestling exchange. But Edwards came out and immediately went to work taking dos Anjos down, and the head post really wasn't much of a thing until the fifth round because he wasn't trying to create distance in the clinch and strike and hinder the takedowns. He was actually trying to stay close to dos Anjos, chest to chest. Surprised him with the grappling in the first. I mean, Leon Edwards, we all knew he was a surprisingly good wrestler. All the heavy hands guys, me, everyone else, Wyman back in the day, they go like, what's weird? Leon Edwards is always billed as a striker, but really he's done way more wrestling lately. The guy is a good, solid grappler and wrestler. I mean, even in his, and you've noticed the improvement in his wrestling over recent years, but even in his third fight in the UFC, he was against Usman, and he did some of the best stuff in a bad position against Usman that I've seen anyone do. And he's only got better since then, but I suppose Usman probably has too. But yeah, I thought he did really well in the first round, getting all over dos Anjos, and just establishing that little question there for dos Anjos, you are not going to have a quick way out if you take me to the ground at any point. And Cruz, one of Cruz's on-point observations in the night was that by going to the clinch he can stop dos Anjos pressuring him. And this is one of the things I was thinking throughout. I've always preferred dos Anjos as a lightweight. I understand that it's a big weight cut and it takes a lot out of him, but that was the class where he could bully, and he is a really good bully. And not bully in the sense that, if you punch back, he'll give up. I mean, he's a really good pressure fighter, one of the best I've seen. And that, when you mix the body shots, the forward movement, the body kicks that are opened up by the forward movement, and the takedowns, just the short ones that he hits from those boxing exchanges, that's just perfect. He fights so well there. But at welterweight, I don't think I've seen him pressure anyone really effectively. Some of that is because he's moving around, like in the Robbie Lawler fight. Other times, he's just put on the back foot by other people's wrestling. Colby Covington, Usman, able to put him on the back foot because they were going to wrestle him. And then Leon Edwards in this fight, I was putting together that Filthy Casuals Guide, and it basically became a study on just this one position rather than a full Filthy Casuals Guide to Leon Edwards. I did call it a Filthy Casuals Quickie, I think. But he really doesn't throw in combination much. He throws 2 punches, or he'll just throw his left straight. And he'll throw his left and duck below the opponents and throw his left straight at the same time, or he'll duck inside his opponent's swing and swing a wide left over the top. He's really just 1 or 2 at a time, looking for the body kick occasionally, but doesn't do a lot of extended kickboxing. This fight, he was actually doing a bit more. He was throwing the 1, 2, 3, getting the hook in on the end, getting dos Anjos to fire back and then cracking him with the hook, and really just playing with his expectations really well. And by doing that, he was able to do exactly what dos Anjos did against Lee and what Frankie Edgar does all the time. If you throw punches at the guy, get him punching back, you can then move to grappling and shock him. And he was able to move to grappling and then move back and catch him with the elbow. So it was like he'd throw a 1-2, and then he'd throw a 1, and then dos Anjos would come back and he'd duck in under it, and then come up on the double collar tie, and dos Anjos would try and move away, and he'd elbow him. Or he'd come up on a single underhook, and then dos Anjos would try and move away, and he'd elbow him. And, dos Anjos has seen the film. He knows that this is what Leon Edwards does. He elbows the fuck out of people on the break, and he still couldn't stop him, because your hands, when you're in the clinch, they're down. They're on the person. And as they're moving out, if they've got their arm over the top of yours, they're going to be able to elbow you. It's a really underappreciated area, and Edwards is probably doing it the best in MMA right now. And I think what Whitman said, towards the end of the 4th or 5th or whatever it was right. Leon Edwards is looking really good, but you can see that Dos Anjos is also looking really good. He's very sharp, and Leon Edwards is just making his life very difficult. And that's what Edwards does. And, afterwards, having success with these Filthy Casuals guides has brought me into contact with some of the dumbest people on the internet. Just like all the comments for this one were, whatever it is, 3-piece and soda. And then people just looking it up afterwards, or the Ryan Hall one, and be like, hate this guy, so boring. Why? And you're like, why did you look up a video on him then? What's the problem, dude? But yeah, people really don't seem to like Edwards' style, and I think it's because it's pretty subtle, some of the stuff he does. Like, if you watch the Filthy Casuals guide, Donald Cerrone's in on a single on him on the fence, he slaps him in the ear a couple of times, Donald Cerrone comes up to punch him, catches a bicep tie on the inside of Donald Cerrone's arm, uses that to turn him instead of the underhook, then goes to post his head and then pulls his head back and elbows him. And if you don't know what's going on, you're just like, why is this guy just clinching and elbowing? But he's actually creating these little openings. Like, there's another one where they're in the over-under along the fence. Edwards is pushing him into the fence. Edwards puts the back of his hand in the crook of Donald Cerrone's bicep, which is how you push through and you pummel for the underhook. So Cerrone's elbow immediately clamps to his body to try and deny that space, and then Edwards pulls his head back and elbows him in the head instead. It's faking pummeling to elbow people in the head. I mean, that's pretty tricky to see, and it's not very glamorous. I mean, the elbow's good. It looked like it fucking hurt, but guys can't really appreciate that in the same way that they can, a nice kickboxing combination into a low kick. So maybe this sets up Masvidal versus Edwards, which would be a good fight. Trying to think of other ones. I mean, he's already fought people like Vicente Luque. Looking at the rankings, who's around him? I mean, he's at number 13 now. Wait, somehow he moved down. Who moved up? Damien Meyer, maybe? If you put him with... Meyer could be an interesting one, because Meyer's problem has been like the really strong, aggressive wrestlers. Guys who can just pick him up off their leg and shuck him off. Edwards would be interesting because, maybe he beats him up with strikes from the clinch. Maybe that sort of just pursuing the single, dropping to your back, coming up on the single is the sort of thing that Edwards struggles with. That would be fairly interesting. Neil Magny's number 13. That's interesting. Zaleski, Elizeu dos Santos. That would be an interesting fight. But that's a bit of a step back. I mean, he's down at 14. Edwards is up at 12. These have got to be, I don't know, have they got the new ones in yet? Because I would think he'd be higher. I mean, Lawler's at 10, and Lawler hasn't really done much in a while. Pettis is in at 7, and you're like, one win in welterweight. It's the rankings. They piss me off. I mean, he could fight Pettis and probably beat him up. Till would be interesting. Apparently they have beef, but Till's all the way up at number 5 at the moment, so, But then looking at these rankings, Dos Anjos is number 4, so the number 12 just beat the number 4, so he should be going up. Yeah, fuck it, give him one of the top 5, because apparently he just beat one of the top 5. Covington's booked, Woodley's booked, so I suppose that does leave Masvidal. Anyway, as a night of fights, it was fairly alright. I mean, my highlight of the weekend, well, actually, Pacquiao versus Thurman was good. Pacquiao, I was saying this in my pre-fight piece at Unibet, but when you think like old-timers or guys who carried their ability into their 40s in boxing, it's normally like defensive geniuses. Manny Pacquiao's genius is very much in the offensive area. It's all the angle changes, constant movement, constant firing, rapid-fire combinations, stepping out the side door and firing more. Very, very slick, very quick. But those are things that don't typically age well, and he's managing to... It's not the same as when he was just, decimating guys like Miguel Cotto or firing 1,000 punches to land 500 on Margarito, which was just stunning. But it's, as a Manny Pacquiao impression, it's fantastic, and it's still good enough to win fights against guys as good as Thurman. And then there was another one, what was his name? I watched the Pancrase card, or some of the Pancrase card live, and that was absolutely fantastic, because there was a lad, a flyweight. He was fighting a guy called Ogi Kubo, who's not the Ogi Kubo, who is also fighting like next week in Rising. But his name was Bokang Masinyane, and he's from South Africa. And he's 6-0, no finishes on his record, so, if you're hoping for a big knockout, don't. I said this on Twitter, but he looks like a 40-year-old toddler, but he moves like he's from the future. He's just shooting in, taking this guy's back, suplexing him multiple times. The guy comes up on his leg. He does like a jumping Enzui-geri with his knee to try and take the guy's head off. Just absolutely nuts. And he just smothered him on the ground too, He was controlling one wrist, flattening the guy down on it, beating him up. Fascinating guy. Really good wrestler. Exciting on the feet. If you want some excitement from this weekend and you were disappointed by the prelims of the UFC show, look him up on Fight Pass. He's fantastic. Right, let's do a quick question and then we'll pop off until later in the week. Hello, Mr. Slack. It is late on a Sunday morning in Germany, and I am watching last night's fight card. Just got done with Hooker versus Vic, and I imagine you are doing about the same thing as me right now and feeling at least a bit aroused by Hooker's beautiful right feint to the left hook finish. Now let me come to my question before I drift off towards stupid juvenile jokes about being aroused by hookers and so on. I've been going through your amazing work, and buttery, lately, which involved listening through all your podcasts. Somewhere in the 70s, some guy suggested that acrylic glass might be the solution to the old ring versus cage debate, and I was going, yes, finally, because I have been thinking about this as the obvious solution for years, and been wondering what I was missing, and why this solution has not been implemented years ago. Well, you were about to give us your opinion on that topic, but then hilariously derailed yourself into a cage versus ring argument with yourself, presenting all the arguments in favour of the ring just to shoot them down again anyway. This does sound like me. While this was really entertaining, I still don't know your thoughts as to whether a box or something made of acrylic glass could be the future of MMA, and I am really interested in your educated opinion. On a side note, I have been DQ'd from my amateur kickboxing match last weekend due to extensive use of the cheeky nodder, and I'm blaming you. Best regards, Simon. Simon, you cheeky bastard. Stop headbutting people. Until you get in the big money. Yeah, acrylic glass, I was about to say Playtex. No, what's it called? Perspex. And things like that, often suggested, just have a box made of that. A few problems. I mean, one, not a lot of give compared to a fence, a little bit less forgiving once you slam into it or you're pushing someone into it. Secondly, you'd probably have to go pretty thick for it to not break when, two heavyweights ran and Randy Couture running Gonzaga into the fence, think about that. And then, in a plastic cube. Yeah. By the way, cube, is there a top to it? Or we just put them in and then they've got to use whatever air is in there or they both die? The cube doesn't open until you're finished. Someone's going to use that for like a dystopian future film and they're not going to credit me or pay me. But you heard it here, so remember it. But yeah, I think the other thing is visibility, because visibility has always been the big debate on this. Like, that's the only argument in favour of the ring, basically. Other than like, oh, you can cut off the ring easier than you can the cage. To which the answers are learn to cut the fucking cage or make a square cage. Like that's nothing to do with the ropes that's doing that. But the ropes are better for visibility if you're there at floor level in the arena. If you go watch a kickboxing event, it's a lot easier to see than if you watch a UFC event, especially if you're in like press seats. What can I say? But you basically can't see shit because of the fence. So it's their middle ground between actually working as a barrier and visibility. Now, the plastic cube should solve that, theoretically, but I feel like you think of how many dudes are fighting each night, think of how much of the time is spent on the boundary of the arena, it's gonna get pretty fucking smeary. I think, within a couple of fights, there'd be like almost no spots in the cage where you could see straight through. You'd have to have people cleaning it constantly. And of course, like, if you're cleaning it all the time, it's going to get slippier and slippier. I also think it's just prohibitively expensive to put together and set up for, each event. Unless you have, like, 4 long bits of it and then just have ring post style things in the corner, maybe that would work, but you'd have to, I don't know. The more fights I see in the cage and the ring, the more I feel like the cage is just a fine solution. It doesn't really, the one thing people point to is like Jake Ellenberger getting his toe stuck once. Like, oh, okay, that makes up for literally every fight in the ring being disrupted by one guy going through the ropes. I think the cage is pretty much serviceable with the exception of the viewer, the viewing experience at floor level. And I think then, you just got to rely on them having decent camera work and stuff. It's like being at a concert, unless you've got front row seats, you can't see shit. You've got to look at the screens at some point. That's just the world we live in now. Anyway, cheers, Simon. Right, I reckon that'll do us for today. We will be back later in the week to preview, is it UFC 240? It could be. I mean, looking at the fights that aren't the main event, it could well not be. So we'll be talking about that later in the week. We'll have some stuff dropping through the week, got some stuff for the Patreon boys. Possible Filthy Casuals guide, but we'll see. So if you want to get in on the Patreon boys stuff and support the podcast, keep us going, sign up to the Patreon. Much appreciated. I love you. If you want to send an email to the podcast, fightsconbypodcast@gmail.com. And if you want to see what I've written this week or last week or whatever, or what I'm writing at any time, fightprimer.com. I'm your boy Jack Slack. Sam Alvey's spray tan sponsorship bless.